I do remember my note to hit record, and I've successfully done it. So let's move into today's session on saving money by menu planning. So I am Nikki Johnson, helping out today. I am an extension educator for community health and nutrition with the University of Minnesota Extension, as well as North Dakota State University Extension. So happy to be here. I'm also a registered dietitian, and joining me this afternoon is Susie West, and I'll give Susie a moment to introduce herself.
Hey y'all, my name is Susie West. I'm also a health and nutrition extension educator. My area of focus is on healthy food access and really making sure that everybody has the ability to access food that is nutritious and healthy. And hopefully one of the ways we can do that is by planning some easy, healthy meals. So glad that y'all are with us today. All right, so a couple of our objectives for today. We really just want to kind of help give you guys some strategies and maybe some menu ideas that you might implement at home to save you some time and some money. And again, you're gonna kind of get a lot of information, and hopefully a couple of those things will stick out for you, and you can jot a note down and say, maybe I will try that at home next week or this weekend. And we're going to kind of move into the next slide here. I would love for y'all to kind of throw it in the chat. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how skilled would you say that you are in menu planning? I know I've seen a few people come through in the chat earlier mentioning, I've done it before, maybe it was kind of hard or I didn't stick with it. Wherever you are at on the spectrum is great. Wow.
Oh, I was going to say, we've got a full spectrum here, Susie.
We do. That's awesome. I love that though, because that means that y'all are going to be able to help each other in this too, right? Like me and Nikki are not we're not the experts. Y'all, we want to be able to have some kind of discussion. Menu making, 10, using a menu plan, 1, relatable, right? Like raise your hand if you've ever been personally victimized by yourself when menu planning. Hello, me. I have had so many times where I'm like, oh man, I'm going to make all these great things and then don't end up sticking with it, or life happens. I would love to hear in the chat maybe some of the barriers or things that y'all have struggled with when trying to menu plan. Obviously life happens. Sometimes, you get sick and then you don't feel as ambitious cooking. Variety, cooking for 2. I am with you, Deanne. It's just me and my husband in my household. Lots of different schedules. Cooking for picky eaters. Just having general ideas, current struggles, family members. Yes, mental health does make it hard. Always wants meat and potatoes. So taste preferences, right? I know in my household, it's just the 2 of us. My husband and I work different shifts and I have food allergies. And so, there's a lot of different things that kind of go into that for our meal planning as well. All right, y'all, this is great though, to have this kind of variety. Again, hopefully we can all get some ideas together. All right. So a couple of the benefits of menu planning or meal planning, obviously the saving money piece is big, but I think some of what I'm hearing in here too is this time piece, right? Like your time is so valuable, and the time that you get to spend with your family is so valuable. And I know for me too, like having the mental space about not having to get home and be like, oh geez, what am I going to make for dinner? Like, well, I already planned it. I have the ingredients. I know I can make this, or we're going to talk about what happens if maybe you don't end up wanting to make that meal anymore. But just want to really acknowledge too that like menu planning is challenging, sticking with it is challenging. And that's okay. That's part of the learning process. planning to cook a certain dinner, then plan change when nobody's home. Um, so when thinking about menu planning, it's also reducing our food waste. We're not throwing away as much stuff. Hopefully, if every item in your fridge has a purpose or in your pantry has a purpose, makes it a little bit easier to make sure that stuff gets used up, and also cuts down on impulse buys at the grocery store, as well as, not going out to eat because food is already expensive. Add on top of that, tip and the charge for somebody else preparing your food can add up pretty quickly.
So as Susie already mentioned, menu planning, it takes time. It's a process. Don't expect perfection right off the bat. It's a process, right? It's changing probably some habits that you had before. So take it slow, and we'll give you some hints or steps to help you along the way. Hopefully make this process go a little bit more smoothly, feel a little bit more attainable, make you feel a little bit more prepared. So to get us really moving into that space of menu planning, here's just a few tips that, like I said, I think would help you along the way. We're also going to utilize these as a way to kind of guide us through that meal or menu planning process. So the things that came to our mind as we started thinking about menu planning was, one, starting simple. Well, and again, we'll dig into all of these. Entrees first, vegetables and fruit. Don't forget them. I should have put a note there, like, don't forget. Flexibility. We got to be flexible, and we'll talk about that a few different times today, and just saving your menus. So just some hints for menu planning. So again, meal planning or menu planning does not need to be an elaborate task. I think a lot of times when people start to think about meal planning, you're like, oh, I have to do all of these things. I need to get fancy, but really menu planning, especially when starting out, we want you to start simple. We want you to start slow. It might be as slow as just planning one meal per day. Maybe it's just a couple days per week even. Um, a lot of times when we think about menu planning and starting simple, dinner is a really good place to start as kind of our kicking off point, because that's usually when the whole household might be home together, right? Again, don't worry about being fancy, especially when you're starting off here. Rather, we want you to think about those things and recipes and meals that you know, and those things that you like. This concept, I will say, definitely for me is something I found out the hard way. When I started menu planning, I had a lot of energy and a lot of excitement about it. And so I created a menu for the week off of all new recipes. All I can say to you is total rookie mistake. While it was, fun to maybe try something, it was one of those things, like, I just didn't know if everybody was gonna like it. Because I didn't know the recipes, I had to constantly be looking at the different directions and instructions and things like that. So it ended up feeling overwhelming. And I just kind of overdid it. And we don't want you to halt that progress of creating a new habit. So again, we want you to focus on making things simpler as you start building your menu. And there's a lot of different ways that we can look at that simplicity and where we were going to start. When you think about, again, meals maybe you already enjoy, that can be a jumping off point. Or just simply focusing on the entree first. Maybe it's focusing on the protein source or coming up with some meal themes. But we're going to give you a few ideas about how you can build that menu. Now, before we dive into focusing on the entrees first, there was something that I wanted to just simply mention, and that we want you to be mindful of as you start building a menu. And that is keeping in mind the seasons. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. And there's a few different reasons that we might want you to be thinking about the seasons. First, the types of foods or the meals that you make is probably going to change throughout the seasons, right? Middle of summer, while the weather is nice and warm, grilling is something that you're probably going to do a little bit more of or might do. While soups and slow cooker meals are something that you're probably saving up for the colder temps, right? So by keeping in mind the seasons, we're going to be adding a little bit of variety to our menus without having to put in a lot of effort or a whole lot of thought. The bigger point, though, I think I'd like to make when you think about the seasons and menu planning is that it can also help you to save money. And it can do this in a few different ways, but I'd say most specifically in thinking about produce or thinking about those fruits and veggies. In season produce is often going to be a lot less expensive, so you can save money at the grocery store. However, we have months of the year where we don't have a lot of local fresh produce, and so it can be a little bit more expensive. So one way we might be able to plan throughout the seasons is by incorporating fruits and veggies that are either on sale or looking for those frozen and canned options. So again, just kind of moving through the seasons, thinking about the seasons can help us to plan our menus accordingly.
And one way to start thinking about planning your entrees, it's really common for us to build a meal around a protein. And so that can be one way, just an easy way to kind of start thinking about what you're going to eat this week. And again, don't feel like you have to plan out 3 meals a day for the entire week right off the bat. Um, Maybe pick a couple nights a week. If we're thinking about dinner first, again, that's a really good place to start, is by planning out our dinners. What kind of protein are you feeling this week? This is a discussion that happens a lot in my household. Like, man, we had a lot of chicken last week. I don't think I really want chicken this week, or maybe only one time this week. I'm really kind of feeling maybe some fish this week, or um, man, I wonder who I can ask to get some venison because that sounds really good. An actual conversation that happened this weekend at my household. Um, so kind of building around a protein source, um, and that can kind of give you a lot of different options as far as you're not nailed down to a specific recipe quite yet, but maybe just kind of feeling out what you're craving, and then you can build from there. So you can see on this slide, we've got kind of the different proteins laid out for each day of the week. And that's going to look totally different based on your household and your food preferences and your dietary needs. Um, Nikki is going to touch a little bit more on how you might build a recipe or build meals around the protein on the next slide.
My clicker was just being a little bit slow there. So another way you might want to look at starting your menu plan, kind of like Susie alluded to, but is by thinking about the entree type. Kind of mixing things up so that you've got a variety of options on your menu, but you might be able to do a double duty on, say, your protein source. A really good example of that, from what you can see here, is sandwich and pasta. Okay, it doesn't have to be on Monday and Tuesday. That's just happened to be how I wrote it out on here. But one thing that I really like to do throughout the week is I love to go buy a rotisserie chicken. And that rotisserie chicken ends up serving a dual purpose. I can use it in multiple meals. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, really just depends on the dishes that I'm using. But for the example here, I might take that rotisserie chicken, take it off the bone, shred it all up, and I can make chicken salad sandwiches for dinner on Monday night. But then I might be able to use some of that shredded chicken in like a chicken veggie olive oil type of pasta, right? So I'm still getting a nice variety of options on my menu. I'm not going to be stuck eating the same meal day after day, because I know in my household, if people are stuck eating the same thing day after day, they're simply not going to eat it, right? There's going to end up being a lot of food waste. I know a couple of people mentioned in the chat too, learning to cook for 1 or 2. I know Susie, you mentioned that too. That's a great way. Like, you probably don't need an entire rotisserie chicken, right, for the 2 of you for 1 meal. That'd probably be going overboard just a little bit. But it's a multi-purpose type of item where you can use it for multiple meals, or if it doesn't fit on your menu for that week, even thinking about freezing it and saving it for later.
Okay, another way to kind of, think about our entrees could be around like the theme, like a theme, and not like in a, I don't know, kitschy, like amusement park kind of way, right? Although that's totally fine too. Maybe having kind of a schedule of like, all right, Mondays we do a vegetarian entree and we have a veggie sourced protein, plant-based protein. Taco Tuesday, all about that life in my house. Um, and then, maybe one day a week you specifically have a pantry meal or a freezer meal where you have stuff in the freezer, in the pantry, and that's what you build your meal off of for that evening. Um, this is also like a really great way to incorporate back that seasonality piece. So during the summer, you might switch it up and do salad Saturdays or, soup, have a specific day that you do soup every week. I know too, like if you have kids or maybe if you're just nourishing your inner child, incorporating holidays, like, am I gonna do a charcuterie board with like a ghosty themed meal on Halloween? Yeah, I am because food should be fun too, right? Like you can incorporate fun things into your meal planning. Don't feel like it has to be rigid. Embrace the seasons and find those themes that kind of work for you. And that can kind of just make it easier to, you don't have to think about it like, all right, you already have an equation and you'll figure that out as you practice meal planning more, what kinds of things work for you and your family and your household needs.
Okay, one, I'm gonna steal the charcuterie board. I'm definitely gonna do that
Good.
next week. I thought you just said the word wrong, Susie, but I
No.
love that idea. The one thing I was just gonna mention, and this is something new I've been trying, but I feel like it's been a really nice budget saver for me. And also kind of, I don't know, it stretches me a little bit, but doesn't make me go to the grocery store. And that's that pantry meal, or like taking the extras, if you will, that are in my kitchen, whether it's the freezer, the refrigerator, or the pantry, and creating that at home meal. Like I said, it's just something new I've been incorporating, but it's gone over really well, I would say, in my household. Because it's, I don't know, it's kind of fun to see what you can make with the extras lying around. Like a really good example of this is towards the end of August, I had an abundance of additional produce. Like I had zucchinis coming out the ears, I had some random bell peppers. And so it was like, okay, how many different ways can I use these items in a meal or in meals? And I gotta tell you, I got pretty creative. Pretty creative. But
Um,
like, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I wanted to touch really quickly on this comment in the chat from Alex who has an onion allergy. Alex, I feel you. I have a dairy allergy. I'm allergic to black pepper as well, which makes my life very complicated. So I feel you on not having, quick items that are available and easy to make. Um, Honestly, one of the things that we do is we make stuff ahead and we freeze a small portion of a meal so that I will have a ready-made meal, at least for myself. Um, and that is not always a great solution if you have, multiple people in your family and you need a quick meal that's available for everybody. But that might be a way that you can, have something at least for yourself and then have the rest of the family do yeah, yeah. Okay, wow, lots of food preference and allergy things. I'm so glad that we're able to have this conversation because it's really hard to manage, and especially when you have multiple people in the household. But our approach has really been like freezing meals specifically for me. And honestly, maybe not always the best, like budget wise, but when I do find some safe items like packaged things or freezer things that I can have, I don't share them with my husband. he he can eat whatever brand of, chicken nuggets, or he can go get something out to eat fast if we really have to. And I don't have that choice. So I don't share. I kind of keep mine, but that is one way that we kind of cut down on that cost as far as um, making sure that I at least have something safe to eat because when you get into like meal planning and stuff, and having to fall back on freezer or pantry items, it can be really challenging really quickly. Um, and if I was to say Alex or other people with food allergies and food preferences, like feel free to throw some of those challenges in the chat and we'll try to kind of touch on those as we go through, but it is really, really hard.
Absolutely. So the final way to maybe think about building your menus is by starting out with some of your favorites, and it doesn't have to be just you. Think about the other people in your household if you have people living with you, but write down some of those favorite foods or favorite meals that you have. I will say this was after my rookie mistake of, again, going crazy with all new recipes and things like that that I had found. This is actually the way we've been able to be successful in our menu planning in my household. Everybody's kind of gets to choose one favorite meal or one thing that they want to have that week for dinner, and then we use that to kind of build out our days. So what I'd like for everybody to do just for a moment, grab a piece of scratch paper, pen, pencil, whatever you got by you. But just for a moment, write down a couple of your favorite foods or favorite meals that you have in your household. What's your go-to, Susie?
Go-to meals, honestly, we do a lot of like tacos and we do a lot of pasta in our household because I am a noodle queen and I could eat pasta every day. My husband, not so much. He is a Texan born and raised. And so he is very much like tacos, burritos, Tex-Mex, anything in that genre. He's all about it.
Mm,
But that it kind of works out nicely because then we can we get to kind of swap around a little bit and we both get to try maybe different stuff. And it also kind of divides the responsibility of cooking. You know, like I don't make enchiladas in my household because I don't do a good job at it. He does. And he doesn't make puttanesca because he's not very good at it. And that's my thing. So it ends up kind of balancing some things out in the kitchen as well.
yeah. I like the dipping it up. We also kind of have that dynamic at our house. I am a terrible dough maker. It's just not a skill that I've acquired. I keep trying, but I'm not quite there yet. My husband is phenomenal at it. So if there's ever anything that requires a dough, he's in charge of it. Some of the other stuff is on me, but a couple of things that we really like to do at our house. I mentioned pasta because it's simple, it's versatile. You know, we can have a red sauce, we can have a white sauce, we can do like a lemon garlic butter type thing. There's a whole bunch of different flavors we can do. But I think I might have mentioned this to you before. My new recent favorite is taking a 35-cent pack of ramen and doctoring it up to be super flavorful and that extra level of healthiness by adding in all the veggies. So I've been making like a yellow curry ramen bowl and delicious. And I see we've got a whole lot of ideas in here. Love this. Okay.
Oh, yeah. We've got tons of ideas. Oh, frozen cheese pizza, but throwing your own toppings on it. Yes, love that. Don't pay extra for the mushrooms. You got them in your fridge already. That's a really smart way to use up like maybe some of the sad produce in the fridge that, needs to be eaten. Um, yeah,
It's
that's what I
almost
do.
there.
That's what I do with like stir fries. Like if it's in the fridge, it's fair game. It's going in a stir fry or in fried rice. Love that.
And I know, Susie, you and I talked a lot about like a semi-homemade. That's almost
Yes,
like that's like a common denominator between a lot of my meals. Um,
right.
I'm totally fine taking something that's maybe a little bit more packaged or convenience, but really healthifying it, adding in the good stuff like even the frozen pizza, but adding all your own toppings. Okay, you
Right.
got that one convenience thing, but then you add all the extras to make it, semi-homemade.
Yes. Not everybody can be Ina Garden, but everybody can be Sandra Lee, right? Like we've all got some semi homemade in us. Um, I love it. Okay, so I really wanted to, now that we've got some really great ideas in the chat, hopefully y'all were able to write some ideas down or check some things and keep it in your back pocket for later. I really quickly want to touch on how you might incorporate sides, snacks, and extras into your meal planning. Um, okay, so obviously, like you eat more than just your meals every day. Probably most people snack, and I, for one, am a grazer, so I am eating like every 2 hours because that's just how I am as a person. Um, Snacks and extras and sides are a really nice way to kind of fill in some gaps in our diet. Like, personally, I don't love fruit. I really struggle incorporating like fruit into meals, but hot diggity, you give me an apple slice, like some apple slices and peanut butter for a snack. I have that on my repeat pretty much every week, 3 or 4 times a week. I'm having an apple and peanut butter because that's it's good. It's got protein, it's got fiber. I'm getting a fruit. Um, all of that. And like with vegetables too, some people really struggle getting veggies in as a side, or, why don't you try them as a snack? Have some baby carrots on hand and some ranch, or have some baby carrots and some hummus. Look at your overall diet and think like, what things do I need more of? Like most of us, gonna mostly be fruits, veggies, and whole grains, and find ways that you might be able to kind of plug those in as snacks. Um, I want to say too that like a lot of times if you're planning out some of your snacks that aren't necessarily prepackaged items, because prepackaged snack items can get pretty expensive, like I think about those like little snack packs that have like crackers and some cheese and some nuts or dried fruit or whatever, and they're like, I don't know, $2 or $3 a piece. It's like, well, if you have some Tupperware or even a plastic bag, and you can kind of build those yourself, um, nobody's going to stop you from copying that idea, right? Like you should do it because obviously it works. So thinking about those things that you might want to plug those extra things in, and also uh, planning some snacks ahead of time is a great way to kind of prevent splurging on eating out if you're having a really busy week and you're out and about. Um, it's a great way to like, okay, I can at least have a snack now. That's not going to ruin my dinner or whatever. I can have a snack now that'll hold me over until I get home late or what have you. And then you can still cook, or you can be flexible and maybe change up what you were going to make because you've already done the planning piece. So I don't feel like I did a great job explaining that. I'm sorry. I got really excited about snacks because snacks are my jam. Snacks are my jam.
When I think about this too, especially when you mentioned the fruits, veggies, whole grains piece, is that I really think about those items as, again, probably like multi-purpose. So because I'm writing this menu plan out, I can easily see where like a fruit or vegetable can fall into like a side dish, but then how I could also use maybe like the other half of that item, or if it comes in like a multi-pack or something like that, using it in another dish. Like cucumbers is a great example for me. I love adding cucumbers to a sandwich. I love adding cucumbers to a salad, right? So I can add that as like a side for a meal or two, but I also can use it as a snack for another day, say with like some hummus or something like that. So I really try to think about, again, because I've got that whole plan listed out, where I can plug in those fruits and veggies and how I can use them on multiple days, because there's nothing more that I hate than throwing away fresh produce. It makes me so sad. I don't like to do it. So finding those different places is really helpful.
Those dual purpose ingredients.
Yeah.
Um, we do that a lot with like tortillas and wraps in our house. You have tacos for dinner one night and you only use like, because there's only two of us, you only use 6 or 8 tortillas, and then you still have so many produce comes to our house to die.
I get it. I get
Relatable.
it.
Make a wrap with it later. Use it to make a breakfast burrito, etc. Oh, we've got some talk about dehydrators down in here that I want to look at. Oh, yeah. Dehydrators are really fun. Um, that's a nice way to kind of use up or repurpose some produce if you have a dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator, I think you can throw stuff in the oven at like the lowest setting for a few hours and it will work similarly. That was
We
not
might,
very scientific. Might Google that before you.
I was gonna say, maybe that's a webinar for another time,
Yeah.
Susie, talking about food preservation. Love
Ah,
it.
Nikki.
Yeah, coming up with some ideas here. I love it. So the next thing that we wanted to do here is because, right, this is a meal planning webinar after all, we wanted everybody to take a moment to maybe actually do some menu planning. Okay, just jotting down a few ideas. You do not have to build an entire week's worth of a menu right now, but maybe just taking a moment to pick out 1 or 2 days. Again, starting with that entree first, keeping it simple, and identifying again 1 or 2 entrees that you would want to make in the next week. And if you're getting really ambitious, totally feel free to fill in all 5 days. I did add a couple of resources to the chat there for you. Feel free to, download those and fill those in if you'd like. And again, once you get those main entrees figured out, maybe start thinking about some of those sides, some of those extras, some of those snacks that you would add to your day as well. So I want to give you just another minute to kind of work on that. And again, don't feel as though you have to complete all of the days. I know I'm giving you a minimal amount of time. Oh, and thank you, Sarah, for adding that drying food at home resource. I knew Extension would have one. All right, how's everybody doing with that? Thumbs up, grab a reaction, kind of let us know how that first step was feeling. All right, seen a couple thumbs up. Good, good. Now, on to the next step of your menu planning.
All right. Your next step of menu planning, you got to buy the stuff, right? Like you got to actually do the thing now. So you have your ideas, make a list. What ingredients are you going to need? Write down a list, put it in your phone, use your notes app, or if you're like me and you're lazy, I just add everything to my cart in the preferred shopping place that I'm going to, put it all in the cart. And then that also kind of gives me an idea of where I'm going to be at on cost. And if maybe there's some stuff I need to swap around or look for something on sale, get a smaller quantity, etc. So get your list written down. And also, before you go to the grocery store with your list, check your cabinets. Check your cabinets and your freezer, and make sure that you don't have, you're not buying duplicates of stuff, right? Like you don't need to go buy another bottle of cinnamon because you have 3 in the pantry. I have done that before. So make sure that you're kind of keeping track of what ingredients are actually necessary, what stuff you already have so that you're not spending extra money on that. And then also it can be really helpful to arrange your shopping list by category, right? So like we write our produce stuff down. Well, when my husband makes the list, he does it all very organized, like produce all in one section. That way, when you get to the store, you're not wandering around or having to stare at your list all the time. You can look at your list. This is what produce I need. Check it off. And so this is going to kind of help cut down on some of that impulse buying. And if you really struggle with impulse buying at the grocery store, and your store has a free pickup option, like most places do, that might be a really great way to kind of like really try and stick with actually purchasing the stuff that you planned for the week too.
And I just gotta say, when you're thinking about menu planning, making a list for the grocery store is a crucial step in fulfilling that menu plan, and helping you to stick to your budget. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so you've got your list, you've got your menu. The next thing that you should do to help you prepare for your shopping trip is checking out those sales flyers, looking at those weekly circulars, whether that is paper or digital. Everybody's got their own preference. I probably look at them in a variety of different ways. But look at those sales ads and see what's going on that week. Sometimes it can also help you to figure out which grocery store maybe you want to go to for the week. I know I have kind of like 3 stores-ish that I bop between sometimes. And sometimes I choose a particular store because they have the better deals for that week on the items that are going to fit my menu. So check out those flyers. Clip, whether that's digitally or a paper ad, but clip those coupons and only use the coupons that are on your list or that are for the items on your list. Don't get extras just because. Because really coupons are only a deal if it's an item that you need or will be using, right? Also keep in mind store brands as you're shopping, because brand names can definitely be cheaper store brands can even be cheaper than the brand name with a coupon. So keep in mind those store brands as well. When you think about coupons or you're thinking about sales, one thing that can really help out is by simply knowing the general price of those items that you typically buy. That way you're going to recognize when an advertised special is really a bargain, right? Are you saving 2 cents or are you saving $1.50? An example I used a couple of weeks ago was bagels. Okay, my girls love bagels. They have one pretty much every single day. And our grocery store recently, the price went up way high, like $6.29 a package, right? But they had a sale the other day for $3.99. Well, I stocked up on a few different packages of bagels, right? Because it was a serious bargain. I was saving myself some dollars because I knew they were going to be used. You should also be aware of maybe of those unadvertised specials that maybe your grocery store has. Those can save you money as well, but just be cautious because not every item that's on display at, say, like the end caps of those aisles are always on sale. So just keep your eye out.
All right. One of the most important parts of meal planning, menu planning, is to be flexible. Okay. Not just when you're shopping, but like when you're implementing this, when you're trying this, you might end up adjusting your menu based on sales, right? You might end up adjusting it based on um, maybe they don't have that item, or maybe you get to the grocery store and it's way more expensive. And so now your side of Brussels sprouts that you had planned on, you have to swap for, maybe you do some cabbage or you do kale instead or what have you. And also, as we have probably all experienced at some point in the last couple of years, sometimes it's just not available. And for those with like dietary restrictions or food preferences, um, you know, ingredients really matter. And I know there has been so many times when I've gone to the grocery store looking for my Dave's Killer Bread bagels because I love them and they are safe for me to eat and I cannot get them. And it makes me so sad. So, okay, now I have to be a little bit flexible and maybe swapping around. Maybe there isn't another brand of bagel that I can have. Maybe there isn't. Um, Nikki planted the seed with bagels, and now that's where my brain went. But like, so much of purchasing and menu planning is going to be based around your ability to kind of adjust on the fly, and it's not always going to be perfect. But adjusting on the fly is better than, saying, well, not even going to bother, right? Like small hurdles, we can overcome them. And just kind of mentally maybe being prepared when you get to the store too, that like, all right, I may have to adjust plans as I go.
This next little bit, it's just really simple, single line. Save your menus. Remember those meals or those menus that worked, and what didn't, and keep track. And don't toss them out because you've already put in all of the legwork to prepare those menus, right? You can recycle them, especially again, we can go back to that thought about the seasons, right? If you've got all these different fall menu themed items, you can reuse them again next year, right? Because again, we are able to kind of build in that variety if we're going off of the season. So keep your menus, mark down what worked but didn't, and keep track of that, because that will help you immensely as you continue that menu planning journey. Now, we're probably making this sound too simple, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, I just don't even know where to start. Even though we give you a few ideas, maybe we're starting with the protein first, or the entree first, or excuse me, or we're choosing a theme or something along those lines. But sometimes it can be really tricky just to find that inspiration. So rather than starting from scratch, we encourage you to go to some places that might already have some existing menus. Check out your school menu, okay? Mix it up from the menu that your children are eating that week, but check out the school menus as a way to get some ideas. There's all kinds of online menus out there that you can utilize. Tapping into your family members again for some ideas, things like that. But there's a lot of different places that you can find some inspiration, and we'll share some of ours towards the end of our time here today. But we're curious, where do you find your meal inspiration? I know you guys shared a lot of great ideas earlier about maybe what your favorite meals are, but where do you find those meal or menu inspirations?
Ooh, I just want to say, if y'all are not checking the chat,
I
there's
know.
some hot tips in there. Menu swaps on Sundays, amazing. Love that. I need friends that do that. We also have people in here making meal planning spreadsheets. Um, there was a mention of an app, kind of going back to the grocery store piece. Oh, grocery gadget app on iPhone. So, like, y'all, go back and scour the chats because there's some really, really helpful tips on there. Oh, yeah, New York Time Cooking has a weekly menu.
Good
Local
old,
cookbooks.
love the cookbooks.
Yes. Pinterest. Absolutely. Hospital menu ideas. Yes. I mean, honestly, somebody at the beginning kind of mentioned like, like a meal subscription uh, box kind of thing. Their recipes are usually online too. So if you see one in an ad that looks really good, you go do some investigating. You might be surprised. All right. We are down to the last couple minutes, and the last couple of tips that we wanted to share. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. Please try not to feel overwhelmed though, because menu planning is not something that you have to be perfect at. It's a learning process. It takes a long time to get to feeling kind of confident or like, yes, I really know what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be an elaborate task. It's going to take some time and practice. Um, so as we get ready to kind of close out, a couple other ideas that might be helpful for you. Think about this make once, eat twice kind of framework, using your leftovers, eating them again. I ate my leftovers from last night's dinner for lunch today. Nikki's already touched on this a lot about, using food ingredients from a meal for a snack, multi-purpose ingredients, right? And again, this flexibility piece, we talked about it a little bit at the grocery store, but also just remembering that like life is going to happen. You're not going to necessarily get to implement your meal plan in the way that you thought you were going to. Can you save it for later? Can you freeze it? Can you use it in a different way than you originally planned? Also remembering that your meal does not have to be aesthetic, okay? It doesn't have to be Insta-worthy. And the pieces of it don't necessarily have to go together, right? Like a nutritious, well-rounded, healthy meal that has saved you time and money um, can look like kind of a lot of different things on a plate. It doesn't always have to make sense. But these little incremental changes can have a huge impact on your budget, on your mental health too, about not having to think about what am I going to eat, um, and on your wallet.
For sure. I saw Star mention if she's sure that if she is unsure she can freeze things, she can ask Google. Check out Extension too. We've got a lot of good resources that can that can help out with some of those questions. So with that, I know we're just kind of cruising through as we're getting our getting to our last minute or so here, but we want to know, what money saving tip are you most excited to try that we maybe talked about today? What money saving tip are you most excited to try? Add it to the chat. And as you're doing that, I'm going to, Sarah's on those resources. I wanted to share just a couple of resources that we thought could be really helpful to you as you're kind of starting out this process. One is Real Life Good Food, and we will add these links to the chat, but we'll also send them in a follow-up email. So don't worry about taking them all down too quickly. But Real Life Good Food is a really great place to not only get recipes, but it gives a lot of information about the nutrition of your different foods, and tips on things like food preparation and storage. So just know that that's available to you. I also included this NDSU extension webpage because they also have some great recipes that you can look at. What I love about our extension recipes is that they are tested. People actually check them out to make sure that they work. They are analyzed for their nutrition, and we try to keep them fairly simple so that you're not having to buy 25 ingredients for a recipe. We try to keep things to 10 ingredients or less. So super nutritious. We also have a lot of options here that include videos. So if you like to follow along, that's an option. Iowa State University Extension also has some fabulous tips for menu planning, shopping, cooking, all of the above. So just know that that's out there for you as well. MyPlate.gov is another option. And finally, I also wanted to just do a little plug quick for this 2-week menu kit that the University of Minnesota Extension did create. What's so cool about this menu kit is that it not only has the menu, but the recipes are there for every single menu item, as well as a completed shopping list. It is designed for 2 people, so you'd have to adapt if you have more than 2 people in your household, but it's really easy to adapt, again, based on number of people, or just by being able to cross out an item and be like, okay, I don't love peaches, so I'm going to take that out and then substitute something else in. So like I mentioned, it's got the menus, the shopping list, and the recipe. So cool, right? It's all done for you. So with that, that brings us to the end, or near the end of our session here. And so we wanted to mention just a couple of final things. If you are a part of the University of Minnesota and are looking for a certificate of participation as well as some wellness points, here's what you got to do. You are going to follow that link that I just added into the chat there. There'll be a brief survey for you to take. And as a part of that evaluation, you will be able to indicate that you want those well-being points. Also wanted to mention that we have additional webinars that are going to be coming up in the next several months in a variety of different subjects. We've got some of our talks in Spanish. We've got our Finding Balance and Later in Life Decision-Making series. Making Sense of It All. No Place Like Home, Recovery and Health, and a continuation of our What's for Dinner series. All of our family development webinar series can be found at the link here on the screen. And again, we can definitely send that out in a follow-up email, but we definitely would love for you to engage with us, reach out to us if you have any questions. And with that, I know we're just a few minutes over time, but if people have questions, Susie and I are happy to stay on and answer or help.
So we did get a question in the chat, Nikki, about the webinar counting as CEU for RDs.
You know what, Natalie, if you should be able to still get a certificate of participation. Whether or not you can utilize that for CEUs would be dependent upon if that fits into your CDR plan. But you should be able to use it, yes.